Hey, good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm very pleased and thrilled to have with me as my guest Steve Epstein, who's the managing partner at Fried Frank. Steve, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks for having me.
So, Steve, I think you're the first partner I've had at Fried Frank, so I'm really thrilled to do this interview.
Okay, well, I'm thrilled as well. So look forward to get going.
So, Steve, why don't you start by telling me when you figured out you wanted to be an M&A lawyer, or did you kind of stumble into that?
Well, I think in terms of M&A, I stumbled into it a little bit. In terms of being a lawyer, I think growing up in an immigrant household, it's one of the acceptable professions, and it was really one of those things where being a lawyer symbolized, at least in my household, a sense of empowerment and a sense of acclimating to a new country and a sense of belonging.
Uh-huh.
And so it represented a lot more than just kind of what you saw on TV lawyers doing. And so it became something that was very important once I sort of announced that I had some affinity for being a lawyer as opposed to a doctor or an engineer, the other, I guess, two acceptable professions in my household. Um, I think it kind of it put me on a course that stayed throughout, high school and college and ultimately law school. In terms of being an M&A lawyer, I thought, like most, I think, of us who are lawyers, what we saw on TV is what being a lawyer is all about, and that's really being a courtroom lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried some of that in law school and in some early internships, but I realized that I just had a real interest in how companies work
Mm-hmm.
and what makes companies tick. And shortly after college, I took a job in consulting, and that reaffirmed that interest, commercial interest, and that sort of put me on the path of being an M&A lawyer.
Did you start off right away after in practicing as an M&A lawyer, or did you dabble in other areas of corporate or transactional before you kind of focused on that?
Well, I dabbled a little bit because I thought it would be very sexy to be an international lawyer.
Mhm.
I didn't know what that was, and I guess I still don't. But I thought the closest to that was being a project finance lawyer and doing projects all over the world. And so I started as an intern in the project finance group at the firm where I ultimately started full time, which was Dewey Ballantyne.
Hmm.
And after working during my third year in the project finance space, I realized that it wasn't exactly what I thought it would be.
Mhm.
That it was very large loan documents rather than a lot of international travel necessarily.
Right.
And I saw what the M&A team was doing and the variety of companies, not only with which they worked, but also the variety of legal disciplines that they had to be facile with,
Hmm.
whether it was real estate or intellectual property or tax, all had to be brought to bear to do an M&A deal. And I realized that that was what I wanted to do.
Hmm. So tell me a little bit about how your M&A practice has evolved to today. Has it gone in different directions? Tell me a little bit about how it's evolved.
Well, I think that the great thing about M&A is you don't have to be sector specific.
Mhm.
And so one day you could be working with a healthcare company and understanding things like reimbursement policies. The next day you could be working with a chemical company and understanding, or hopefully understanding, the sensitivities around PFAS liability. And then a tech company which has all sorts of intellectual property issues. And I think that kind of range
Hmm.
um, has always been interesting to me. And I never wanted to really narrow that range. And so
Hmm.
today, um, while it's not a conscious, well, it's a conscious effort. It's not always something that you can achieve, but consciously, what I try to do is pursue opportunities in different kinds of industries, because I think when you represent companies across a broad spectrum of industries, and when you represent private equity firms as well, you bring to bear for every client a sort of 360-degree view of the market that
Mm,
becomes really powerful.
mm,
And that's what I try to do. Obviously, like all of us, I follow my relationships, and some of them happen to be more heavily weighted to one sector versus another. But I do try to consciously pursue opportunities across a sort of a broad spectrum of different companies and sponsors.
Now, do you do an equal mix of buy and sell side, and do you have a preference?
I don't have a preference, but I do primarily I do more buy side.
Oh,
I represent on a regular basis uh, 5 or 6 different corporates
mm,
and a couple of smaller private equity firms. And so for the most part, those transactions are buy side transactions. Obviously, sometimes when companies identify non-core assets, we'll do a sell side carve out. Uh, Sometimes we sell our clients, which is bittersweet for M&A lawyers. It's a
mhm.
great transaction, but then you need a new client after that's done. Um, but I would say the mix is probably 70% buy side or 30% or less sell side.
Got it. Now, after having this very successful M&A practice, I understand fairly recently you took on this role of being managing partner. Tell me a little bit about how that opportunity presented itself, or was that a goal of yours?
Um, I think it's very difficult for that to actually be a goal that somebody has and then that's actualized. It was definitely not a goal. Look, Freed Frank has been my professional home for the last 14 and a half, almost 15 years.
Mhm.
Um, it's an incredibly, I think, close-knit partnership. And I think that is what, if I had to say what our secret sauce is, I would say that is the secret sauce. Um, we know each other very well. We know each other professionally, but we also know each other uh, kind of at a deeper, more personal level. Know things about our families and our outside interests, and I think that really provides an institutional glue that's been very powerful for me personally,
Mm,
and has made me want to not only do deals under kind of the Freed Frank banner, but also to give back to the firm in a different way. And I think being managing partner, along with we have a 3-person leadership team, along with Ken and Scott. It allows it allows me to continue my practice, which we're all 3 of us are very focused on doing, which is maintaining our practices. But also it allows me to do things to, I guess, strengthen that institutional glue
mm,
that our partners share.
mm. What are you finding yourself focusing on in this fairly new role, would you say?
I think, well, we're all trying to when we came into it, we all wanted to kind of find our lanes, so to speak. And my focus is on growth. I think, as I'm sure you know, through doing uh, your day job as well as these podcasts,
Right.
is firms are growing at kind of unprecedented rates.
Mm-hmm.
And 20 years ago, a lot of the top firms were clustered around a very pretty much the same revenue levels.
Yep.
And 20 years later, there's been a tremendous segmentation of the market. So I think growth is very important,
Mm,
and balancing that growth with the culture pieces that I talked about, that institutional glue, that is a fine line, really delicate balance, but also really important in keeping together the institution, uh, both from a cultural perspective, but how that culture impacts the product that you produce, which is the legal judgment that our clients buy. So my focus is really on growth
mm,
and business development.
mm-hmm.
I've been lucky to be able to grow my own practice over the time I've been here, and now a part of my what I'm charged with doing is helping others build their practices as well. And that's, incredibly gratifying when that can happen. I mean, it's early days. I've been in the job for 3 or 4 months,
Mm.
but in the instances where you can help, particularly younger partners, um, get more at bats, feel more confident about going out and presenting themselves and the firm. I think it's a level of gratification that you don't get when you're doing that, on your own.
Yeah. Now, is that something you're enjoying, recruiting and business development? It's not for everyone, as I well know.
Um, well, let's put it this way. I'm not going to put you out of your recruiting job. Um, I do enjoy it because I think just like it very much akin to enjoying working across different sectors
Mm.
and understanding what makes companies tick. I think part and parcel of that is I enjoy understanding what makes people tick.
Yeah.
And uh, and that's really what recruiting is about. It's I think people distill it into um, a level of simplicity that I think is not correct, which is, how much does one firm pay versus another firm? And I think it's far more complicated than that
Mm.
because at this point, um, you know, high-end lawyers are, getting compensated in a very healthy way. And so it's beyond just the compensation. I think it's really about um, how to make that lawyer feel that either he or she or a team of people that they've worked with would fit into a new platform and feel excited and enthusiastic about showing up for work every day.
Yeah.
And I think that is more than just, what the comp looks like at the end of the year. I think it's about um, feeling that the person next door to you is rooting for you to succeed as
Mm.
opposed to, kind of seeing whether or not you're going to fail. And I think creating that atmosphere is very, very important in a law firm that's going to be healthy.
Yeah, interesting. Now, since you took on this role, did you find that you learned a lot about the firm that maybe you didn't know very well before, or tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I've definitely connected with a lot of people that maybe I didn't work with every day.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think was important for me to do was pick an area of the firm, whether it's a department or a group, not spend a lot of time with on a typical day and
Mhm.
get to know them better. I
Yeah.
think that recruiting for people for different groups and also being able to help other groups sell business.
Hmm.
You can't really do those things unless you really deeply know what people do. You
Yeah.
have to not only understand, you have to live in the nuance
Hmm.
because today the practice of law is a lot more specialized than ever before.
Yeah.
And if you know people and their practices at a surface level, you're not going to be serving them well. You're not going to be able to cross sell them to clients. You have to really understand why a particular individual, based on his or her experience, is exactly the right person for a particular situation in a company that, for example, they've never met before, but overlaying their experience onto that company's problem set makes it a perfect match. And to
Yeah.
do that, you really need to live in the nuance.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. How are you juggling your time? Because obviously you could spend your entire time doing that, obviously management job, and a lot of managing partners at firms do that. You mentioned you're still maintaining a full practice as well as your other co-managing partners. How are you, juggling that, and how are you making sure that you're not spending too much time or not enough time?
I think that's been frankly, the most challenging part. There still are only 24 hours in a day, despite what I would hope for. I think look, it teaches you time management skills in an kind of an uber level. I think
Yeah.
as a partner in a law firm, you have to be really good at time management to begin with in order to build a practice. I think in order to overlay some of these other functions that I'm now responsible for, it just takes it to a different level.
Yeah.
You got to be disciplined,
Yeah.
and you also have to trust that the reason that my partners voted to put me in this role is because they trust my judgment. And so when you make a decision, you need to be able to go with it and move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
I think that revisiting decisions, puts you in a state of analysis paralysis that is not actually good. So I think you have to understand that for the most part, your judgment is good and you're going to make really good decisions.
Yeah.
When you don't, you need to own those mistakes and fix them. But if you don't make a decision, that in and of itself can lead to bad outcomes. And so remembering that is easier to do when you're focused on it, like you've just focused me on it. In the day to day, you sometimes forget, but I think that is what helps with time management.
Are you enjoying it as much as doing M&A work, or there's still nothing like doing an M&A deal?
Well, there's nothing like I would say doing an M&A deal is really, it just feeds the soul in some ways, because when you really get to the right sort of level with a client, you really do feel like you have an incredibly vested interest in helping them make the right decisions.
Yeah.
And they, I think, turn to you as a colleague rather than, someone that they're paying for, basically a vendor.
Yeah.
And if you can translate that relationship into a trusted advisor relationship,
Yeah.
which, I've been lucky enough to do with a number of clients, there's nothing more gratifying than people calling you and saying, hey, I've got this issue, even if it's not an M&A deal necessarily, but just I've got this problem, and it's not an M&A problem, but I really trust your opinion on things and your judgment, and I'd love to hear your read on this situation. I think there's very little in this profession that kind of rivals that feeling.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Steve, this has been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate your taking the time. Congratulations on your new position. I'm glad it's working out so well for you.
Thanks, Richard. Really nice of you to invite me to be with you, and I enjoyed the conversation.
This is Richard Hsu and Steve Epstein. Thanks.